Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you a chilling story full of impactful revelations. Let's meet Harrison Cole Everhart, a marketing executive who had a near-death experience that changed his outlook on the future of humanity and the true meaning of faith. What he saw on the other side is nothing short of shocking, and the message he received about the mark of the beast will make you question everything you've ever heard about the end times. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for a spiritual journey that will leave you speechless. My name is Harrison Cole Everhart, but before December 12, 2023, few people actually knew me. Not because I hid, but because my life was wrapped in a facade of success. I was a marketing executive in Austin, Texas, and my shiny resume impressed anyone. I closed multi-million-dollar contracts, traveled the world, and attended exclusive parties. But deep down, I was empty. My relationship with faith was superficial. I went to church on major holidays, more out of social convention than out of devotion. My wife, Charlie, sometimes called me an outward-looking Christian, and honestly, she was right. I knew enough about God to recite a few prayers, but I never bothered to understand what it meant to live in faith. That December, my life seemed perfect. The company where I worked was about to launch a revolutionary project, and I was responsible for presenting it. It was an innovative technology that promised to eliminate financial fraud and ensure secure transactions with a simple implant in the hand or forehead. I didn't see any problems with that. On the contrary, he believed it was the future. Charlie, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable. "Harrison," she said one night as we were having dinner, "have you ever stopped to think about what these technologies mean in the long term? It feels so invasive." I laughed, shaking my head. "Charlie, you are worrying for nothing. This is progress. Imagine how safe and convenient it will be." She sighed, but didn't insist. Charlie knew that when it came to work, my determination was unwavering. If someone had told me that my life would completely change in a matter of days, I would have laughed. But it all started that rainy morning when my car was hit at an intersection. I was on my way to a crucial presentation, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. As you read this, I want you to know, I'm not sharing my story to scare or impress you. My goal is simple, to make you understand what's coming and how to prepare. Because, and believe me, the future will be a test not just of endurance, but of faith. On the morning of December 12, 2023, the sky over Austin was covered in heavy clouds, and a light rain was making the streets dangerously slippery. I was late, which wasn't unusual for me. As I drove along the main highway, I mentally adjusted the points of the presentation I was about to give. For me, that meeting was the culmination of months of intense work. My car cut through traffic in a hurry but with control, or at least that's what I thought. When I reached an intersection, the light was green for me, and I continued without hesitation. It was then that a black SUV appeared at high speed on my left. The impact was brutal. The sound of metal twisting and glass shattering was the last thing I heard before everything went out. The silence that followed was strange. I found myself floating, as if I were hovering over the scene of the accident. My body was there, trapped between the seat and the dented dashboard. I could see the paramedics trying to revive me, their voices muffled as if they were underwater. One of them shouted, "No pulse. Let's try again." Another responded, "No time to waste. Get the defibrillator ready." I watched everything with surreal clarity, but I felt no fear or pain. On the contrary, there was an indescribable peace, as if I had been taken out of the chaos and placed in a place where nothing mattered other than the present moment. Suddenly, I felt a pull, as if an invisible force was pulling me away from the scene. The surrounding lights and sounds disappeared, and I was enveloped in a comfortable darkness, which soon gave way to intense light. It was a light unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just brilliant, it was alive, pulsating, as if it had its own essence. She seemed to call to me, and I knew I should follow her. As I approached, heavenly music filled the air. It was harmonious, with voices singing in languages that I didn't understand, but that touched my soul. I was being led to something greater, something I could never have imagined while stuck in my earthly life. The light in front of me became brighter and more vibrant with each step I took, until I finally reached its center. It was impossible to look away, and at the same time, the light seemed gentle, welcoming. It wasn't just a physical light, it was pure love, love that filled every empty space that I didn't even know existed inside me. Suddenly, the heavenly music intensified, and I realized I was no longer alone. A figure emerged from the light, tall, majestic, radiating authority and compassion. When my eyes adjusted, I realized I was standing before Jesus Christ. His presence was indescribable. He wasn't like the stained glass images or paintings I knew. His countenance was human, but there was a light within him, as if the universe itself dwelt in his being. His gaze was so deep that I felt completely exposed, as if he could see every thought, every decision, and every regret I had ever had. "Harrison," he called my name. His voice was firm, but filled with a tenderness that disarmed any resistance. "Do you know why you are here?" I didn't know what to answer. I was still trying to understand how I got there, but all I could say was, "No, but I know it's real." He smiled slightly, and the love in his eyes made me fall to my knees. "You were chosen to see what is coming and to bring a message to the world. Humanity is about to face a choice that will determine the eternal destiny of many." Jesus reached out his hand, and when he touched my shoulder, I was enveloped by a series of visions that left me speechless. Every scene felt more real than the life I knew. I saw people walking on busy streets, happy and carefree, but something seemed wrong. Small devices glowed on their hands and foreheads, and they all seemed controlled by an invisible force. "These technologies," Jesus said, "will be presented as advances that will make life easier, but they are much more than that. They are the symbol of a definitive choice. They represent trust in the human system rather than in me." I wanted to ask more, but my voice trailed off. He continued, "What you will witness now is a glimpse of what is to come. Pay attention, as your role will be crucial." When Jesus touched my shoulder again, the environment around me changed abruptly. The celestial light disappeared, and I found myself in a place that seemed like the near future, but distorted in ways I could never imagine. I was in a modern city, with shiny skyscrapers and busy streets. It was impossible not to notice the uniformity between the people. They walked hurriedly, each with a small device glowing on their foreheads or hands. Jesus began to explain, "These devices will be introduced to the world as solutions to global problems: financial fraud, identity crimes, human trafficking. They will be presented as the next logical step towards convenience and security." I watched as huge screens in the streets displayed advertisements from religious and political leaders encouraging the use of technology. "There is nothing to fear," said a renowned pastor on one of the screens. "This does not contradict our faith. It's just a technological advancement." I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something wrong. The people around me didn't seem happy, despite promises of safety and comfort. Their faces were empty, their steps almost mechanical. "But accepting this mark will not just be a practical decision," Jesus continued, with a grave expression. "It will be a definitive spiritual choice. Those who accept it will, in effect, reject me and my Father. Their hearts will harden, and the Holy Spirit will no longer be able to reach them." Then the visions intensified. I saw children being implanted with chips, parents applauding, believing it would protect their families. I saw people being turned away from essential jobs and services because they didn't have the devices. Those who resisted faced isolation, hunger, and even persecution. "They will think they are free," Jesus said, "but they will be trapped in a system that will take them further and further away from me." Horrified, I tried to argue, "But this cannot be allowed. Someone needs to warn them." He looked at me with a seriousness I will never forget. "That's why you're here, Harrison. You must be the voice that many will listen to. It won't be easy, but you won't be alone." At the end of the vision, I saw a small group of people, men, women, young and old, refusing the mark. Despite the difficulties, they were together, in prayer and with unshakable faith. Above them I saw a light similar to the one that brought me to Jesus, and he said, "These are mine, and I will sustain them." When the vision ended, I looked back into the face of Jesus. He placed his hand over my heart and said, "Take this message to the world." After the disturbing visions, I found myself before Jesus again. His expression was one of profound sadness, but also of infinite compassion. "Those who accept the mark will do so thinking it is just a technological choice," he began. "But the reality is much darker. Acceptance of this mark will be an act of separation from God, a severing of the spiritual connection I offer." I was still processing what I had seen. Empty faces, separated families, hardened hearts. "Why?" I asked. my voice cracking. Why would this happen? Why can't they see the truth? Jesus responded with a calm that seemed to traverse time and space. The world is already being conditioned. The obsession with convenience and control has turned many away from me. When the brand is introduced, it will be the culmination of a process that has been occurring for generations. The separation will be subtle, but relentless. Every day someone lives with the mark, their heart hardens, and the voice of the Holy Spirit becomes harder to hear. Again, scenes began to form around me. I saw families moving away from God, gradually losing spiritual sensitivity. I saw empty churches while religious leaders accepted the mark and encouraged their followers to do the same. Jesus continued, "The enemy will present this as something harmless, even beneficial. He knows that he cannot force anyone to separate themselves from God. Therefore, it will create a choice that seems logical and practical. But by accepting, you are declaring total trust in the human system and rejecting me." I watched helplessly as more people chose convenience over faith. But then, Jesus showed me something different. I saw a small group of people who refused the mark. They were isolated, living in humble places without access to modern facilities. But their lives were filled with inexplicable joy. "These are my faithful ones," Jesus said, looking at me. "They will face persecution, but I will be with them. Just as I provided for the Israelites in the wilderness, I will provide for them in supernatural ways. Your strength will be a testimony to others." With a voice that echoed in my soul, he concluded, "You must warn others about this choice. Many will hear your message and awaken, but you will also face opposition. Never forget, I am with you until the end of time." The peace I felt being with him was invaded by a sense of urgency. I knew what I was shown was more than a warning. It was a calling. Jesus turned to me with an expression that mixed compassion and authority. "Harrison," he began, "what you witnessed should not be a cause for fear, but for preparation. It will not be easy for my faithful to resist, but I have already provided everything they need to win. That's what you should share." Suddenly, I was enveloped by a series of practical visions. First, I saw people gathered in small communities, helping each other. They were not sophisticated or technologically advanced places. On the contrary, everything was simple but functional. I saw families planting and harvesting their own food, using hand tools and relearning long-forgotten skills. "My followers will need to prepare themselves both spiritually and practically," Jesus explained. "They must strengthen their faith, but also learn to live outside the system. Not because I will abandon you, but because the world will do everything it can to pressure you to conform." The vision changed again, and I saw people gathered in fervent prayer, with open Bibles in their hands. Their faces were lined with adversity, but there was a light in their eyes that I had never seen before. Jesus continued, "Prayer will be the greatest source of strength. Tell them to remain in communion with me and with each other. They must edify their souls with the word, because the time will come when access to the Bible will be restricted." Another scene formed. I saw a young man teaching natural medicine to a group of people. He showed how to use herbs to treat wounds, how to identify edible plants, and how to create basic medicines without relying on industrialized products. Jesus explained, "Practical skills will be crucial. Teach them to grow food, take care of their health, and exchange goods and services in alternative systems. This will make them less dependent on the system and more resilient for what's to come." Finally, the last vision emerged. It was a moonlit field where a small group of believers gathered in secret. They shared food and words of encouragement, and their voices rose in song, even though they knew they were being hunted. "Tell them," Jesus said, "that they will never be alone. I will be present in every step, in every moment of pain, in every victory. Their strength will be a testimony to those who do not yet know me." The weight of this mission was enormous, but the certainty of Jesus' love and presence made everything bearable. As soon as Jesus' last words echoed in my mind, the light around me began to pulse differently. It was like I was being transported again, but this time to an alternate future. Around me, a new scenario took shape. It was no longer the oppression of controlling technologies or the blank faces of those who had accepted the mark. Instead, I saw a growing movement of resistance and spiritual revival. Young people were kneeling in large open fields, with tears streaming down their faces, hands raised to the sky. Their songs of worship echoed like thunder. They cried out to God with a passion I had never witnessed before. It was as if they had been awakened from a long sleep. and were now determined to fight against the approaching darkness. "These are my warriors," Jesus said at my side. His voice was full of pride and hope. "Young people will reject lies even if they are tempted and persecuted. They will seek an authentic connection with me, something that goes beyond empty traditions or mechanical rituals. This revival will be like a spreading fire." The vision expanded, showing small groups of believers in houses, forests and caves, praying, sharing, and protecting each other. They were being hunted, but their courage was unshakable. I saw a woman hiding a Bible in an inside pocket of her jacket while leading a prayer. A young man, surrounded by soldiers, refused the mark even with a gun pointed at him. "They will give everything for me," Jesus said with a solemn expression. "Your acts of resistance and martyrdom will be an inspiration to those who are confused, who can still be saved. Through your faithfulness, many will awaken." Suddenly the view changed again. Now I saw something even more powerful. Large crowds of people were breaking their connections with the system. They destroyed their devices, threw away digital identity cards, and marched together in prayer. The unity between them was so strong that it seemed like an insurmountable spiritual wall. Jesus looked me straight in the eye and said, "The faithful will not only endure, but they will shine like lights in the midst of darkness. Those who face persecution with faith will show the world what it means to truly live with me." As the vision faded, I felt a warmth in my heart, as if there was hope in even the darkest circumstances. As I recovered, Jesus' words echoed incessantly in my mind, as if they were engraved in my heart. Every moment of silence was filled with the memory of his presence and his clear instructions. Prepare, warn, and encourage. I knew I couldn't waste time. The first person I shared the entire experience with was Charlie. After days of listening to my narrative, she began to believe it. "Harrison," she said one night as she held my hand, "this isn't just a story. It's a calling. You need to do something about this." My determination grew, but with it came challenges. Some friends and colleagues called me crazy when I mentioned what had happened. "Harrison," said Damon, my colleague and closest friend, "you have suffered severe trauma. These visions are just your mind's way of dealing with it." I looked straight into his eyes and replied, "These aren't just visions, Damon. I saw the future. I saw what's going to happen, and people need to know." He laughed, shaking his head, and changed the subject, but the weight of the rejection was heavy. I knew the message I carried would not be easily accepted. I started meeting with people who were open to the message. Small gatherings in my house were the beginning of something bigger. I spoke about what Jesus revealed: the need to strengthen faith, build communities, and live outside the system. "Those who trust in God will not be abandoned," I told them, echoing the words of Jesus. "Even when all seems lost, He will provide. He will always provide." As I spoke, I felt a supernatural peace. Jesus had not only shown me the future, He had given me the certainty that the final victory was already guaranteed. "Nothing can separate us from the love of God," I repeated. Our little group grew. People began sharing stories of how they were preparing, learning how to grow food, creating support systems among friends, and studying the Bible in more depth than ever before. Even with all the support, Jesus' final words never left my mind. "Harrison, this message is not to generate fear, but to awaken faith. Many will be saved because you had the courage to speak out." The mission was just beginning. I knew that. Regardless of the difficulties, I needed to continue. As my mission took shape, I realized that the responsibility Jesus had given me was greater than I could have imagined. It was not just a message for a city, a nation, or an era. It was an eternal calling, a reminder to all humanity that the time to choose between God's way and the world's way is running out. The nights became long and filled with prayer. I knew that many would not accept my words. Opposition would come, not just from skeptical people, but also from powerful systems that were beginning to implement the technologies Jesus had shown me. The first promotional campaigns for implantable devices began to emerge, and the talk I heard in the visions was becoming a reality. But just as Jesus showed me the darkness to come, He also showed me the light. I clung to that vision of young people kneeling, calling out His name, refusing to accept the mark, even in the face of persecution. These images were my strength. In one of the meetings, a young man named Caleb approached me after my story. His eyes were full of tears. "I always knew something was wrong," he said. "People are so blinded by convenience. But what you're saying, Makes sense. I want to prepare. I want to resist. You're not alone, Caleb, I replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. Jesus is with you, always has been. With each story like Caleb's, my faith grew stronger. I knew the journey would not be easy, but Jesus' promise resonated like a spiritual shield. Nothing can separate mine from my love. The victory has already been won. I end this report with an appeal. No matter who you are or where you are, your life is made of choices. Every small decision brings you closer or further away from God. Technologies that seem so convenient and harmless today can be the beginning of a path that leads to spiritual disconnection. But there is a choice. There always will be. Jesus didn't ask me to spread fear, but to spread hope. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His light shines in the darkness, and He is calling you now to rise up, strengthen your faith, and endure. The question I leave for you is this: when the time comes, will you be ready to choose? If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.